Don Turner is an innovative executive who has successfully worked the gamut from turnaround to growth companies across a broad range of marketplaces. Don started his career as an engineer for General Motors. From there, he was recruited by Booz Allen Hamilton as the youngest associate in the world's technology-focused strategy consulting practice. Finding out early in his career that he had a natural affinity for computers, he then helped pioneer the use of advanced computer simulation and animation in the design of large-scale factory automation systems design. Since those days, his career has been a blend of strategy consulting and executive operation roles. In the past 2 decades, he had served as CEO of 6 technology and engineering companies, and between those roles provided strategy, M&A, and general consulting services for a variety of companies. Don received his undergraduate degree from General Motors Institute with an engineering thesis on flywheel ring gear processing. He then received his MBA from the University of Michigan, where he also completed a Master's of Engineering thesis on computer simulation technology. As Don said earlier, he lives in Dawsonville with his bride of soon-to-be 46 years.
Good morning. My topic is company restoration, the new normal. And this came about after talking to a number of colleagues who knew my background of, especially most of my career, I've been doing strategy work. And in strategy work, I was also involved in forecasting marketplaces out 5-10 years. I wrote an article on smartphones for the Strategic Planning Forum 4 years before they were ever introduced. I developed the architecture for process control systems, what the new model was going to be about 7 years before it came into realization. So I've always been looking to the future into marketplaces. Secondly, I've done a lot of turnarounds, and I don't think anybody comes out of their MBA program saying, I want to be a turnaround guy, but at some point in time, you got a few gray hairs, somebody says, hey, we got a broken company, could you come in and take a look at it? And you go in, if you're halfway successful, I guess you kind of become a turnaround guy because they send you to more broken companies. But that's my background. So they asked me, what do I think was going to come out of this, this whole pandemic situation? So I wrote an article for LinkedIn in June, and Jim asked me to present that article. I would not have changed anything since June. I probably would add a few things. But I'm still pretty confident in what I'm predicting, how we're going to go forward and how to bring companies out of this current dilemma that we're in. That being said, this is one man's opinion, so I'm open to questions and whatever. Jim is, as we go through, if people have questions, just put it in the chat room and we can stop. And I would love to have this be interactive. And if you have questions, let them put them in there or comments, feel free. So we'll get going. Bottom line, I believe there's no going back to normal. We already see that. There's going to be a new normal where fundamental changes have been made to drive this. And we're already seeing it in a lot of different areas. Many businesses, including the marketplaces, are going to require entirely new ways of doing business. Some businesses, I mean, if you make, believe it or not, if you make touchscreens, you're in trouble because a lot of touchscreen manufacturers realize that people don't want to touch a screen. So there's industries that have had their challenges, and they're going to have their challenges going forward. So what I'm going to talk about today is really 3 things. One, I'm going to talk about my view of the new normal, what's driving it. I'm going to talk my idea of restoration, what I'm calling restoration as a evolution of restructuring and turnaround practices. And then thirdly, put together something I call the 5 C's restoration strategy for how to bring companies out of this dilemma that we're currently in. Well, we find ourselves in interesting times, don't we? We are looking at life differently. We are conducting business differently. We are interacting with people differently. And what we're finding out is that we are already operating in a new normal. Now, there's a few businesses that have actually benefited from this. If grocery stores, home delivery of grocery stores, entertainment, Amazon, Netflix are all doing well. Puzzle Warehouse that makes jigsaw puzzles, as their business is up over 2,000%. Try to find with adults and children purchasing laptop computers, try to find a laptop computer at Best Buy right now. It's very difficult. Recreational vehicles are taking off, both recreational vehicles and camping sites, because people don't want to get on an airplane for vacation. They do want to get away, but they don't trust the people cleaning the hotel rooms. Ergo, recreational vehicles are selling very well right now. That being said, let's put things in perspective. We have a very real worldwide pandemic here, but it's probably the greatest catastrophe of our lifetimes. But to put it in perspective, during the early 1900s, I think 1918 to 1920, the Spanish epidemic, the Spanish flu, killed over 50 million people in the world. At the time, we have a population of about 1.8 billion, which tells me that's about 3 to 5% of the world's population were killed by the Spanish flu. COVID-19, we've had just under 1 million deaths worldwide. We have a worldwide population of around 7.9 billion. And if my math is correct, that comes out to about 1/100 of 1% fatality rate in the world. So it's serious. It's the most serious thing we've seen in our lifetime, but let's put it also in perspective. Plus, we live in a time, and again, I'm a technology nerd, so I'm constantly looking at what technology trends and all that. And unfortunately, we're in a time where we have access to a greater amount of information than any other time in the history of mankind. At the same time, every piece of information is subject to being spun, fabricated, outright, changed, altered. We've got, and without getting this into a political discussion, we have a media that has a certain bias that's working their own political agenda. So how long this pandemic lasts is a function of several things. One, the vaccine, and two, the media. That being said, it's real, perceived, or people are perceiving it as real, and we're having starts and stops as children go back to school, and then they find out that somebody's got virus, so they shut the school down again. But that's what we're dealing with and going forward. So the question is, what do we do with what we're faced with? Now, the new normal is not going to come all at once. The vaccine, some people hope it's going to be here this year. It's not. I originally predicted in June that it'd be here in Q2. Now the latest news from the government is probably Q3. So we are going through 2021 without a widespread access to the vaccine. And that's just going to be a reality of the situation. So masks are going to be the dress du jour, and we'll learn how to operate that way. Secondly, there's going to be a new normal ways of interaction. Now, as people come through, there's going to be some people that permanently work at home digitally. Some major corporations have stated outright that they're going to allow their employees to work out in the remote areas. So there's also going to be people that have been psychologically damaged by this and don't want to come back to the workforce. I think there was an article written on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago that I thought was very well done, and basically said a day in the life of somebody in 2021, and basically they show up at the office one day a week or every other week. But that's going to be the realities of the interaction. Thirdly, this is permanently going to change parts of our commercial landscape. Airline industry. Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett dumped over $1 billion of Delta stock about 4 months ago, saying that the airline industry would not come back to its normal rate in our lifetime. I happen to agree with them. The airline industries were already operating under a very slim margin, and now when they're operating at 1/2 to 2/3 capacity, it's going to be even more difficult for them to make money. You can see that they are dropping satellite locations, satellite airports in terms of servicing. Offices, New York City has got a 10% vacancy rate increasing rapidly as companies are finding out they don't need as much space they needed to. And residential, there's a movement from the urban area out to the suburbs, even the rural areas. Right now, there's 13,000 empty apartments in New York City, and that's increasing rapidly also. People are finding out that they can live a much better, higher quality of life more cheaply as they move out to the suburbs or the rural areas. Fourth thing that's driving the new normal, and this is going to be reality, and I will go ahead and name the big elephant in the room, and it's China. So China's always been viewed with some skepticism, and now I believe they're going to be viewed with outright cynicism. They were late to report the virus. They misled their numbers. When countries 1/10 the size of China were reporting deaths of 350 and 400 people, China reported 1. And by the way, the other bastion of transparency and freedom of speech, Russia, went ahead and reported 2. So I really don't believe, I've never really believed anything that comes out of China. Now, I've got a unique perspective on China in that I've been in martial arts since I was 14 years old. In doing so, you tend to study a lot about Asian culture. I've studied it in very detailed in terms of the mindsets, and what I find is Americans do not realize how the Chinese think. And one of them, for example, is their long-term perspective. They will make decisions absolutely knowing that it won't come to fruition for years, if not decades. And that is part of their culture. And they are comfortable with that. We worry about tomorrow's stock price. So they've got a long-term view. They've got essentially a dictatorship that allows them to make investment decisions very quickly. A large private equity fund in this country is a couple billion. The Chinese Investment Corporation, the CIC, which I have worked with in the past, has a fund of $1 trillion. China's already outspending us by a quarter on artificial intelligence and several other areas. So they're a reality that when they didn't report the information correctly, they sent defective equipment. I think we need to take a hard look at what we outsource in this country and what we don't outsource. So I believe the new normal, people are going to realize that certain critical products and all that need to be made in this country. So what's some of the new rules for the restoring marketplaces? Well, obviously, survival is rules day one. You've got to survive somehow, some way. Over 100,000 small businesses have gone out of business in the last 6 months permanently. But because this is impacting just not individual companies, but it's impacting marketplaces, I would propose to you that we need to fix not just the companies, but their marketplaces. And in doing so, the turnaround methods that we normally have used need to be updated, expanded into a broader perspective, and how we're going in and thinking about fixing companies. Now, there's no standard definition for the various ways of fixing stuff. And so I came up with my own. So you can feel free to agree with these or not. But I'll walk them through in terms of how I view fix-it situations. The first one is what I call renaissance. The company's actually healthy. It's making money and it's growing, but not growing fast enough. So I call this a transformation focus. I walked into a software company in Princeton, New Jersey a number of years ago, $12 million, making money. They were doing well, but the board said, we're 12 million. We want a 2 times doubling strategy. How do we get from 12 to 25, from 25 to 50? So that was the challenge. So working with the company for about 4 or 5 months, we developed a strategy. They executed on it. 14 months later, they were sold to a much larger company for a great multiplier. And yes, those people are one of my references. They love me. The second one is revitalization, where a company is profitable barely, and it's just kind of gotten stagnant. And you've got to go in there and revitalize the company and figure out ways to grow it. And we're going to talk about some ways to think about growing your business in a moment. The third one is really the standard turnaround. Something's broken in the company. The products are broken. The channels are broken. You need to go in there and quickly assess it and figure out how to fix the company. Restructuring, I've defined as really turnaround with some additional requirements that involve restructuring the company either legally, geographically, selling divisions, increasing divisions, but it's basically a rebuild of the company. And then finally come to restoration, which I view simply as a turnaround where not only the company is distressed, but its marketplace is distressed, its suppliers and its customers. The whole value chain for the company is distressed in some way, and you need to take a more holistic, a more broader view of the marketplace. Then we go to workout, and I prefer to come into companies at the restructuring or turnaround phase before it gets to workout. In a workout, the company may already be in receivership, already in violation of loan covenants, and what you need to quickly determine is whether you can salvage this company or not. If you think you can salvage it, then it moves into a turnaround. If not, then it moves into a liquidation phase. And at the liquidation phase, you're basically looking at a way of exiting it, maximizing asset value for the lenders. And you can use Chapter 7. What is becoming more popular for privately held companies right now is what they call ABC, Assignment for Benefit of Creditors, which does not have as much of the legal oversight and allows smaller companies to quickly get through a liquidation process.